I'd like to take us through a couple of historical things over those last 18 months, just to get a sense of where we've come, and then we can start to have a little bit of a look at where we're going in the next period. So, from a formation perspective, from that very early stage for startups, in the last 18 months, we've seen demand explode across co-working spaces and incubators and accelerators across the country. Just here in Sydney, we've had WeWork offices, 2 new WeWork offices open in the last couple of months with more than 1,000 desks. We've had Tankstream Labs expand by a couple of floors. We've had Stone and Chalk open up in the last 12 months to great success, and there's now more than 90 companies at Stone and Chalk. And Fishburners, where I work, has expanded to Brisbane and Shanghai, and is looking for office space that can more than quadruple the number of desks available at Fishburners workers. I can tell you, sitting in Fishburners day to day, you can feel the startups bashing down the door to try and get in. It's a really exciting time to be working in startups in Australia. And it's a good thing that formation rates are increasing, and as we speak to investors around the country, we also hear that deal flow is at an all-time high, because actually in the last 12 months, we've raised more capital in Australian VC than we have in any year before. So the chart that I've got on the screen here shows the amount of funds raised in VC over the last 10 or so years, and you can see that very far right-hand column is just this last financial year, 2015 to 16. I want to say thank you to AvCal for this data. They do a great job here, and this is from their 2016 yearbook. That number actually doesn't include the single biggest VC fund ever raised in Australia, which was $250 million raised by Airtree Ventures, who are also here, in the second half of this year. And I know Paul's fund is also in the middle of raising a $300 million fund, and they're quite some way down that path. So this year will, in all likelihood, be yet again the biggest year for VC funds raised in Australia. That's a really serious upwards trajectory, and a really exciting future for Australian startups. What does that mean for entrepreneurs founding businesses? It means that it's much easier to raise funds. 2 years ago, before the last Crossroads report was written, you wouldn't have seen a list of significant size with funds raised in the $10 to $100 million range like this. It's just much more possible now for Australian companies to raise big amounts of money here in Australia and to build international businesses from an Australian base. That's really exciting. And I guess these gains have kind of supported a shift. Oh, actually, I've got Atlassian on this slide, and it's worth noting that Atlassian's IPO was less than a year ago. Atlassian, which is now worth more than Qantas, IPO'd less than a year ago, and set the tone, I think, for Australians to aim big. And all of these have kind of been supported by a national conversation shift at a political level around the country. 18 months ago, Tony Abbott was the Prime Minister. There was a lot of head-scratching happening in Canberra about innovation. Even as recently as this weekend, Tony's expressed his views about innovation being not politically desirable. I think, luckily, he's being ignored. And he's being ignored to the tune around the country of about $2 billion in new funds that have been allocated by the federal government and state and city governments all around the country over the last 12 to 18 months. Just this week, Jobs for New South Wales got an extra $10 million to support incubators and accelerators, and I saw Karen here tonight. Congratulations. And this is happening all over the country. So that national conversational shift at a systematic level has really brought together the ecosystem. And this is a new infographic that we introduced into the report this year, which kind of gives you a sense of how many players there are in an ecosystem like this. And it's not just startups and investors, it's also educators, it's also mentors, it's incubators and accelerators, the media. It's a range of different stakeholders that are really playing a part in bringing this community together. So we've come a long way, and we've taken quite a few meaningful steps down that path in the Crossroads towards an economy driven by innovation and startups and technology. What I want to say, and what I think this report clearly argues for, is that we still need to set our sights high. We need to have an ambitious goal in mind about where we can go with this. Because at the moment, we're sort of still tinkering at the edges. We want to be economically transformative. I want to talk a little bit about why we should want to be economically transformative and why innovation is a thing that should matter to not just us in this room, but to mums and dads around the dinner table around Australia. I think everybody here is probably convinced about the why, but I think it's important for all of us to be able to be ambassadors for the cause of innovation and to have the tools in our toolkit to talk sensibly about it to people who don't yet understand. The key thing, I think, for me, the key message that the report distills is that innovation and startups are actually about prosperity. They're about Australia's future prosperity, and particularly when it comes to creating new jobs. This is a really powerful chart, I think, and it shows over an average of 15 economies how jobs are created by young firms. This has been reflected in data gathered in Australia by the Department of Industry, but this is a good example of the fact that actually young firms are creating all of the new jobs in economies around the world. This includes, so the young firms, I'll just explain the chart. The young firms less than 6 years old are above the line in dark blue. Older firms over 6 years old below the line in light blue. And the reason they're below the line is not just so that you can visually distinguish them, but that the older firms have actually shed jobs all the way across the cycle there. And you can see that even if it's only marginal, the young firms are still creating jobs even in downturns, including in the 2008 to 2010 period that you can see, which is the big dip in the yellow line. That is a really powerful message about creating jobs for Australians who are coming through the system right now. And we've got to think about the fact that these aren't just numbers of jobs, these are also quality jobs that are being created. There's a future-facing jobs building on technological advancements, and they're only being created where those businesses are being created. This is a theme that I know Paul is really passionate about, and you'll hear from Paul a bit later on downstairs at the next event. So I won't steal his thunder, but suffice to say that entrepreneurs are creating jobs, and supporting technology and innovation is actually about supporting future job creation in Australia. We've also got some low-hanging fruit that we can still pick here. And if you can see, I've made a little note on the top of these slides about which page of the report, if you want to follow along. I've got a report in front of you, but no need to if you don't want to. There's some low-hanging fruit we can pick. Australia doesn't have any of its top 50, of its biggest 50 listed companies. None of them are software companies. That actually makes us stand out from our global peers. And you can see a list of countries there, including the US, and China, New Zealand, Singapore, all of whom are ahead on this count. Of course, Atlassian would be in our top 50 if they were listed here, and they'd be about 42. But even so, we'd still would be at the bottom of that graph. What that says is the technology sector in Australia still has a lot of impact to deliver. 25% of the market cap of the top 100 companies in the US comes from technology companies. The 3 biggest companies in the US account for more value than the whole of the ASX combined. That should tell you something about the impact that technology can have if it's done well. I want to quickly touch here on a pretty complex diagram, but it's one I really love to use. It's a map of Australia's export complexity. So this basically tells us how complex are the goods that we produce, and therefore how much are we adding value to them before we export them. All of this stuff on the left, which is, I'm sorry, blurring a little bit with the black background, but the whole left-hand side of the screen there is very simple goods, mostly dug straight out of the ground and then shipped overseas. That means that almost no value add is happening for those goods from a human intellectual capital perspective. We can compare that to a country that is heavily based on technology, South Korea, and the whole left-hand side of this chart is lit up in blue, and those are all highly transformed goods, most of them technology goods. South Korea is ranked 4th in the world on complexity of its export profile. Australia is ranked about 56th, I think, around countries like Kazakhstan and Cuba. So that kind of reflects just how much we still have to go in terms of being able to add to our national income with human intellectual capital supporting a more advanced export profile. And startups have a key role to play in that. So I've convinced all of you who are convinced already that startups are really important, and hopefully now you've got something in your toolbox to be able to go away and make the case, or a little bit more in your toolbox to make the case elsewhere. But the core of this report is, okay, we know this is important, so what do we do about it? And right at the back of the report from page 81 onwards, and in a summary form at the front, page 8, we listed 14 recommendations that we think would make a real difference to the ecosystem of Australia. As an aside, I had a quick chat with Colin towards the end of the report writing process for this thing. I said, Colin, you know, if we did all of these, we're not even asking to do all of these necessarily, but if we did all of these, would we be the best place in the world to build a startup? He said, absolutely. So I'll pass that on to you as Colin's word that if we did all of these, we would certainly be one of the very best places in the world to build and grow a tech company, and that's the ultimate aim of the report. Now, we don't have all the answers, but we've got 14 suggestions that we think are some of the answers. I wanted to just touch on 2 of those today, but I'd also encourage you to take home a copy of the report and look at some of those recommendations yourself, because I think they'll really ring true. We based these on consultations over the last 7 months around the country, so I think part of the strength of the report is that they come from you guys, from the community, corporates, startups, investors, and everybody as part of the ecosystem. The one solid message we got throughout the process from everyone we spoke to was that the R&D tax incentive is the single biggest thing that governments in Australia do for startups. It's really pertinent at the moment because there's an R&D tax incentive review happening right now, and the Minister is due to announce his response to that review in March next year. We're actually going to see him in 2 weeks in Melbourne, and if you'd like to feed anything into that process, you can get in touch with him separately. We as a country spend less than we should on R&D. We spend, we're the 14th biggest spender on R&D in the world, and we're the 12th biggest economy. So we have room to grow here, notwithstanding that there are definitely budget pressures on the government to reduce this scheme. And we know that startups spend their R&D tax incentive directly on employing people to develop new products. That's exactly what the incentive is designed to do. So we think this is the really pointy end of a really important scheme. And we'll be pushing really hard to keep this in place and make it more generous for startups and pay more often to help them with their cash flow. The last point I want to make is one about place. And it's more of a question that I want to pose than an answer that I'm providing. One of the recommendations in the report, the first recommendation actually, is that we develop world-class, or at least global scale innovation precincts around the country. Australia stands out from its peers as being a country that doesn't have any identifiable startup hubs or precincts, and it's actually really important, the literature says. Particularly research coming out of the Brookings Institution suggests that the network effects that these sorts of precincts create actually make startups much more effective, and that adjacency to investors and customers and other startups really boost performance. So the reason we don't have the answers is that this changes based on location. Every city is different, and every environment is different. So the question I want to pose is for all of you to go home, and we've got people from around the country here, to go home and think about what a really thriving startup precinct looks like in your city and your town. And that segues nicely into the next speaker, who has been doing a lot of thinking about what a really thriving startup community looks like in this town. She's well known to many of you already. She's a luminary of the startup ecosystem herself. And she's going to give you some exciting news and some interesting thoughts on exactly that topic. So please join me in warmly welcoming Addie Parker to the stage.